You're listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZWLP Conroe and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Welcome to the Legal Connection with Toni and Cheryl, two of Montgomery County's lawyers. And today we're going to be talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment, what it is and what it isn't. We're going to give you a little bit of a background. And then Toni's going to talk to us about Valentine's Day and how relevant it is to our First Amendment. Right.
To both us and all those, lovers out there.
Right. How are you doing today, Toni?
I'm fine. We're going to tie the First Amendment in, at least briefly, to St. Valentine's Day because I've been hearing about it on the radio and because the reason I'm hearing about it on other radio channels before I got up here, not that I wasn't listening to this one, but it's because tomorrow, Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day fall on the same day this year.
Right.
So, and it's weird because Lent starts on Ash Wednesday and ends on April Fool's Day, which is really odd that those two would be the different sides of Lent this year. But anyway, I guess two things. First, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to be here today because I had a trial set, but we had that, and we're both trial attorneys, so you just never know.
Right.
And it reminded me of how difficult trial is for not just the people that are involved in the trial, the parties, but also the attorneys, because we take on so much. It's like taking on their lives. And the people that are in trial are worried not only about the outcome of their case, but how they're going to pay for it and how much they're being charged per hour, where we're just sitting around. And the attorneys are worried that not only that we're not going to be paid, but that we may not perform to the expectation of our clients.
Right.
And we want to do the best that we can. And so anyway, yesterday's trial went really, really well. And we ended up settling, which was good. But there was a reading that I wanted to just kind of, because we are the Legal Connection, to let people that are in trials know that it's actually something we should embrace to get justice, not just to settle and say this thing needs to happen. And it's actually in the Bible too. And the reading for yesterday was it was Sunday, is James 1 verses 1 through 11. And just to paraphrase, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it talks about how that if we're tested and we persevere, that's actually a good thing. That God gives us graces for that. And it's and part of the passage is it says, just the reading is James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion greetings. Consider it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance be perfect, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. But if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, for gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and he will be given it. And that is so true, because you have to pray all the time, because you just don't know what the outcome is going to be. So I thought that was kind of an interesting reading, and it kind of ties it all in, because you can take these trials, and when you persevere, you will get, and if you're doing everything for the right reasons, don't go to trial just because you want to win. You go to trial for just and right, or don't go to trial. It's not worth your time. Right. But that you can get, if you just can persevere, that God is with you, and you'll be fine. Now, what the other thing that I was going to talk about is St. Valentine's Day. And this little bear, and for the people that are on the podcast, this little bear was a Valentine's gift I got from my husband a few years ago. And he got it actually because he's an anesthesiologist, and his group of nurses gave it to him. And we had the exact same reaction when we saw it. He's like, "Oh, isn't this cute? We're a team." And he said, "Timo." And I'm like, and when he gave it to me, I'm like, "Why'd you bring me a bear that says Timo? You're so sweet. I love you." But because we're so dumb and we speak Spanish, it's Te Amo. We both thought the same thing. We both thought it was Timo. It was dumb. But anyway,
that would not have occurred to me, but I can see why you thought that.
We're like, yeah, team spirit. This is great. Okay, so St. Valentine's Day. So this is all going to tie into First Amendment rights, which sounds, I thought that was also interesting that there's 10 commandments, and the Bill of Rights also has 10 amendments. But the first one is, I don't know if it's my favorite one, but it's a very, very important one, which you're going to discuss much more in detail. But St. Valentine's Day is actually something that shows that had they had a First Amendment right, a freedom of religion, back in, before America, the people that didn't live here, then we would probably not have a Valentine's Day, because Saint Valentine was a martyr who was killed by the Roman emperor. Let's see what the emperor's name was. It was not Claudius, but
Constantine?
no, it was somebody the second. All those Romans, they kept the same name over and over again. It was, and he was actually good friends with it. It was it was the Roman emperor Claudius the second. Like, there's a million Claudiuses. But anyway, the second was back in 269, and he actually liked Valentine, and that was his last name, because he thought he was smart and he thought he was pretty fun. And the Roman emperor tried to convince Valentine to go to worship their pagan gods, and Saint Valentine said he couldn't do it. He was Christian. There was only one God, and he felt really bad about it. But he was a martyr. He was executed before because he would not convert to from Christianity to the Roman, whatever they worshipped. Mm-hmm. So had they had the First Amendment right of freedom of religion, we would not be celebrating the Love Day that we have today. Now, what is also important is the reason that St. Valentine's feast for many, many years was celebrated on February 14th. And it's because that they said, prove your God is a real God to this St. Valentine when he was in prison. And he said he actually brought the one of the jailer's daughters, I think her name was Julia, he gave her sight. She was blind, and St. Valentine prayed that she'd have sight, and she was healed by this. And so he was made a saint, many, many years later by one of the popes. But right before he was executed, he wrote her a letter. I guess he was in love with her, and he signed it, "Your Valentine." And
really? That
is how Valentine, he became like the I guess the saint sort of love. They don't celebrate the Feast of St. Valentine anymore since like 1969. They removed it because it was becoming so, I think this is the reason. I can't say for sure. But from what I've read, it's St. Valentine's Feast is no longer celebrated as an actual feast day by the Catholic Church, because it's secular, and it's not viewed for the same reasons that it should. So anyway, that's St. Valentine's Day, and
that's wonderful. I love that. I did not know all of that.
First Amendment rights.
Absolutely. So, just quickly before we go to break, I want to talk about what the First Amendment is and a little bit of a background. Okay, the First Amendment, which is what we're talking about today, is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble or to petition the government for redress of grievances.
It packs a big punch in
really
one
does.
amendment. First Amendment rights are huge, and you can get away with a lot of stuff with those First Amendment rights.
One of the most jealously guarded rights in America is the First Amendment right. And boy, that's absolutely true. People have gotten away with a lot of stuff, and it's evolved, but it's important things.
Well, taking statues down, I mean, they can do a lot of stuff. You can pretty much almost say anything you want that's pretty nasty to people, and you get, not short of a crime.
Right.
But you can protest, you can worship the devil, you can pretty much do whatever you want with these First Amendment rights. And we see it on the news all the time with people protesting in the street constantly. Just
right.
I can't think of one example right now, because I'm thinking of all the different protests that I see in other nations that we get to freely do. Burning the flag, First Amendment right.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
and we're going to talk about that case too. Okay, so you're right. Well, what is it not? What does the First Amendment not? There are some restrictions on it. It's given to us through case law.
We should know these things because we've lived it, and it's also what we learned in law school. But
it's not a right to defame someone. You can't.
Right.
You can't. The famous case we're going to talk about in a little bit is the no fighting words. Yeah. You can't address someone in a manner that makes them instantly just want to punch you.
We just had a case that involved First Amendment rights that I'm involved in right now, and basically they have taken some of the edge off our First Amendment rights with certain statutes where you actually can, to some extent, defame somebody if they believe that their First Amendment rights are being curtailed, and that's the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure 27.003. It's called the anti-SLAPP law. You can't sue somebody if, and it was really built, it was really developed because of the internet. You can't, you can say something bad about, like, and one of the really important cases was right here in the Houston area. It was the Better Business Bureau was sued by a plumbing company. I think the plumbing company was, I can't remember the name of the company right off, but it was a big one. And they sued because somebody had put Better Business Bureau had given them a bad rating. Oh, and I can't remember the name. It's going to come to me in a little bit. They had sued them because that the Better Business Bureau had on their website that they were not that great of a company, that they didn't show up on time, and various other things. And so this company had a lot of money, and they sued them to take that down. Well, there's a statute. It's called the anti-SLAPP statute. It's like I say, the Textual Civil Procedure 27.003.
Right.
That basically the Better Business Bureau won in this case. They could say all the bad things they wanted to about this company, but because of the anti-SLAPP statute, because on the internet you can say your opinion of somebody. They ended up being charged hundreds of thousands of dollars, the plumbing company, in attorney's fees because they were upset that they were being defamed on the internet. So anyway, the edge is taken off of our First Amendment rights for defamation now by some statutes, but I think it'll come back around and it'll kind of equal itself out. I think it leans a little bit too strongly toward being able to say bad things that aren't true about people.
Leans too strongly in that direction.
Right.
I agree with that. And I know that the internet has been frustrating because, we used to have 7 years, 10 years, newspaper, things and stuff. But on the internet, it never goes away.
And it's fast. If somebody wants to say something bad about you on the internet, you can't find it, for one thing. It's been spread everywhere.
Right.
And secondly, these new laws, and it's state to state, I mean, internet's, basically international, the new laws will disallow you to, they allow the person that wants to say bad things to get away with it under many circumstances.
Absolutely. And the frustrating thing is that
You
goes
shouldn't
on
be able
to
to
infinity.
you shouldn't be able to say things that are not true about people and get away with it by some law that was for the internet and not otherwise.
I agree with that. Well, our First Amendment rights, the idea of the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, and what we were just talking about, the freedom of the press, they have really pushed every limit on that, but it's staunchly guarded and valued in America.
And did you know that the press can release the names of minors that if they were injured or something happened to them, the press can actually say their name, what happened, and everything.
No, I did not know
Yes,
that.
I didn't know it either. I was just reading up on several other cases for a different case I was working on. Yeah, I didn't think you could release a minor's name. And
I didn't think you could either.
if a child is raped and various other things, I didn't think, but they actually sued on this particular issue, and the press had the right to let the public know. Now, I didn't delve into it enough to find out what happened to that particular person that did that, and I'm not thinking the victim. I think it's because the victim didn't fight back. The victim didn't have a problem with it, and their family.
That's probably
They
true.
wanted people to know about this bad guy out there doing things.
Right. Well, the First Amendment goes back to John Locke, John Milton. John Locke believed in the divine right of kings, recognized rulers derive power from the consent of the people. That was John Locke's thing. Voltaire. Do you know who Voltaire is? The great political theologian type, not theologian, but he was a French philosopher, yes. And he said that the vital commerce of any country is intimately related to the amount of freedom in that society.
That is exactly true.
Uh-huh. And then Rousseau talked about a social contract with citizens and the government. Representatives, citizens give up certain freedoms and submit to just authority unless trust is violated. And when trust is violated, they're going to fight. So it goes way back.
When trust is violated, everybody fights.
That's so true.
That's like in a marriage.
Uh-huh.
That's anytime. Think about it. Your best friend. Anytime you trusted somebody, you had an expectation. If it doesn't get all the way to court, but it's just that's the age-old tenet. You're going to be fighting with somebody. That's the basis of almost everything. Having trust in God, we trust. It's everywhere.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, trust is important. Okay, well, we're about to go to break, but I just want to say that you can check us out on the website at www.legalconnectionshow.com. You can send us your questions at legalconnectionshow.com, and we'll be back after the break and continue to talk about the First Amendment.
Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's radio station with talk, music, weather, and traffic for Montgomery County. Have a question, comment about one of our shows? Want to know how to reach a host? Just contact the station on irlonestar.com or call in and leave a message at 936-647-3776. Get involved with your community with Lone Star Community Radio.
Hey guys, this is Connor.
This is Dick.
This is Chris.
And we're with the Ticket Stub Podcast every Thursday live at noon on 104.5 and 106.1 FM in the Conroe area. Also, anytime at irlonestar.com. You go to irlonestar.com/TTS. You can find all of our social media.
And don't forget, we give away 2 tickets to the Grand Theater on every show.
If you like movies and you like complaining or celebrating anything that has to do with the silver screen, check out the Ticket Stub Podcast and join us every Thursday at noon o'clock on Lone Star Community Radio.
Welcome back to the Legal Connection with Toni and Cheryl. Today, Toni and I are talking about First Amendment. The First Amendment, what it is and what it is not, what it looks like today. And right now we're going to talk about how we got the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights, interesting fact, it was created in September of 1789, and it was ratified 2 years later in December of 1791. And I think the important thing about the Bill of Rights, well, to me, the interesting and important thing, one of those facts that always sticks with me, is that they were so important. James Madison is the one who was so adamant that they be included, but he had to get it passed, the Constitution. You know, he had to get it implemented and signed off on, ratified. So he decided to add these later. But what he really wanted was the first 10 amendments, first 9 amendments are the ones he did. To be added in the body of the Constitution because they were so important. And he wasn't afraid of the Congress that they had back then. He was afraid of some future Congress that was going to take away the rights that were so important.
You know, I'm always confused. Why did he make it? Why did that group make it the amendments? And why didn't they just put it into the body itself?
Yeah, he had some, you know, there were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and he had some opposition.
All those crazy wigs.
Right.
And when you say James Madison, the first thing I think of, especially because we're getting ready to fast for 40 days during Lent, is Dolly Madison cupcakes. Wasn't Dolly his wife? James Madison?
No. Was she?
Yes, James Madison.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Dolly, our first lady. We just got back from the
well, so
Smithsonian.
you know, yeah. No, I know.
And you didn't know it. I was over here going, I want some Dolly Madison cupcakes. James and Dolly, my faves.
Yeah. Well, so the first 10 amendments, they gave us things like the right to bear arms, freedom of religion.
I'm loving that one. Second Amendment.
Freedom of speech, freedom
Fourth
of the
Amendment.
press.
Fourth Amendment's huge in criminal law. The right to search and you can't be searched and seizure, and they have to only have exigent circumstances before the police can come in your house, which is another little tidbit of information. Do not, as much as they help us, and they do help us a lot. Our public servants are amazing.
Right.
You do have the right not to allow the police to come into your house without a search warrant. So if someone comes to your door and they say that they're the police and they want to speak with you, do not let them in unless you absolutely see their badge and you know who they are. Right. And because people pretend like they're policemen all the time.
They sure do.
And sometimes there's bad cops. There's good cops and bad cops. And sometimes they come in and they're really not looking for what they're looking for, and they're
what
looking.
They tell you they're looking for.
Right.
They're looking for something different.
Many of my clients smoke pot. They should be in Colorado. They should not be here.
Right.
And they go in there, and they let them in, and the police find the pot paraphernalia and stuff, and they go to arrest them on something that's completely, because they're usually called on like a noise, deal. The neighbors are mad about the noise. So just our Fourth Amendment rights, or the First Amendment today, is such a critical and important right. Use it. Fifth Amendment is also critical. Will everybody please be quiet when you're interviewed by the police when they pull you over for something?
Right.
Just use your Fifth Amendment right. Okay, back to First Amendment.
Okay, so First Amendment, well, just the whole idea of the Bill of Rights and the amendments that James Madison wanted added to the body of the Constitution, we got as amendments. And I have a Bible verse that I think is interesting. It's actually a little passage. It's Paul speaking freely, defending himself and his conversion to Christianity.
The first guy that was really using his First Amendment rights for the reason he should have, for the glory of God. Love Paul.
Absolutely. In Acts 26, verses 22.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm taking that back. He probably wasn't the first one, but
No.
he was a really important one, writing almost all the New Testament.
Absolutely, spreading the good news.
Mm-hmm.
Acts chapter 26, verses 22 through 26, Paul is before the king, and he is defending himself and telling the king what he believes and why he's moving from Judaism to
Christianity.
Absolutely. Paul says, he's telling his story, and he says, having therefore obtained help of God, I continue unto this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come. So the prophets and Moses also used their First Amendment rights. It wasn't granted to them back then, but they spoke freely.
And they said and usually God would give them some inspiration on what to say, and it all is applicable today.
Absolutely. So then Paul goes on to say, this was his message, that Christ should suffer, and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead, and should show light unto the people and unto the Gentiles. Gentiles are people that are not Jewish.
Now, who was saying this? Paul. Okay.
But he's saying it to the king.
Uh-huh.
So it's applicable because you got the government, then you've got a person that's had an experience, and he speaks freely.
And Paul was no dummy. Paul was a lawyer. At first he was a tax collector, but he became a lawyer.
Yeah, he was a Pharisee. And as he thus spoke for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're beside yourself. All your learning has made you crazy.
I've heard that before.
Paul said, I am not crazy, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knows of these things, before whom I also speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. And to me, this was relevant about what we're talking about, First Amendment, and we're going to talk about the evolution of it.
That packs a big punch. This thing was not done in the corner. We got witnesses. The king really knew it was going on.
Exactly.
A lot of political stuff going on.
Exactly.
Loving Paul. Okay.
Me too. And so I want to talk about William Twin in 1663. Just transitioning, here we are in Great Britain. That's where William Twin was, and he was a publisher in 1663. And he was...
what was his last name?
Twin, Twyn.
Okay.
William Twin.
I would say Twine, but that would just be in the Texas pronunciation.
Maybe, right? Or maybe it is Twin.
I don't know.
He's a publisher who published a book that endorsed the right of revolution, was held to have encompassed or imagined the death of the king. Guess what happened to this guy?
And where was this at?
Great Britain. In
what year?
1663.
I don't see a head on him much longer.
No, it was terrible. He was sentenced to be hanged,
Okay.
cut down while still alive, then emasculated, disemboweled, quartered, and then finally beheaded.
I didn't think it was going to turn out well.
That was standard punishment for treason back then. For speaking freely. And he didn't even write the book. He just published the book.
Wow.
And so
Did he not know the laws before doing that?
I think revolution was at their doorstep, don't you?
Oh,
It was 1663. But I mean, that right, this freedom of speech has cost many people their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we take for granted. Also, this is an interesting story.
We do take it for granted because people can say, they just think because we were born in a time when it's been such a very strong right that's been reinforced over and over that
we flaunt it.
That we know we can do that. And some people, even now, though, take too much advantage of it.
They do.
To the extent that they harm people by what they say to a great
Well,
degree.
in America, in 1735, so this is roughly 100 years later, in America, there was a colonial printer. His name was J.P. Zenger.
This is before we were a country.
That's right. A colonial publisher who was imprisoned for exposing a New York governor, William Cosby, for controlling the local court and newspaper. Zenger printed the paper that exposed the governor, and then he was charged with the crime of seditious libel. Seditious libel is how they used to get these guys. And what it was...
Is that not too far off from what's kind of going on today with them trying to say that, with the administration we have right now, people printing things that aren't true and saying that you've got it's a crime against the nation when it's made up. Kind of the same thing that's going on now, but we have the First Amendment rights that protect us.
Right, that's a great point. Seditious libel was a charge of promoting ill opinions of the government and advocating change. That was so they could be charged with this,
Yeah.
right? So this guy,
This is
J.P.
why they
Singer-
that's why they left England. England was like
exactly,
that,
and
that's
it's
a
going on here.
dictatorship basically,
Right.
even though it
Well,
was.
this is interesting. So this guy's thrown in jail, and guess who his attorney was? Alexander Hamilton. Alexander, could you imagine, Toni? I mean, we're good, but come on.
Didn't they just make a
Alexander
play about
Hamilton.
that?
They sure did.
Yeah, wasn't he in a duel with somebody?
Oh, he's awesome.
Wait a minute. Who was the one? Who were the two of our forefathers that were dueling out with each other, and they were angry because they were on politically opposite sides? Not unlike my case yesterday. Right, the opposing counsel.
Right.
I'm like, will you get over it? Oh my gosh, we're just representing people. We can agree to disagree and be very civil. And I was thinking he might not need to meditate for a while, but we finally did settle it. But who were the two that had the duel? I think it was Hamilton and this is a trivia question.
No, I remember hearing that.
Maybe
but it's
Ethan
not coming
knows.
to
We'll
my
ask
mind.
Ethan.
He has no idea. Okay, well, listen to this. So Alexander Hamilton defended Zenger. Even though Zenger had admitted to the publication, the jury found him not guilty of seditious libel.
Good.
This was because Alexander Hamilton argued against tyranny and for truth and the power of the jury. And people believe that this case was the turning point
Wow.
that crystallized freedom of speech.
That's probably why it was the First Amendment. It was something that was sort of fresh and it wasn't
current
Was Alexander
topic?
Hamilton one of the people that signed the Constitution and helped create the?
I believe so.
I need to go back and review stuff like that.
He was awesome. Alexander Hamilton was awesome, but
It's really interesting.
but
to know.
it crystallized the idea of free press. And so, we've got some other cases. There was Gitlow versus New York. It applied the limitation of the federal government's encroachment on individual liberties to the states as well as the federal government. And the amendment they used to do that, the 14th Amendment.
Oh.
Yeah, the 14th
Oh,
Amendment
yes.
took, remember
I
that?
love the 14th Amendment,
Uh-huh.
too.
It took the
but for that,
restrictions.
the government would have so much more control over our Second Amendment gun control rights, over same-sex marriage.
everything.
They would have a lot more control. The 14th Amendment's a great one.
Absolutely.
We'll get to
So-
that one another day. Another
Uh-huh.
hour.
And then when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about limitations on the First Amendment, what you can't say. So we're the Legal Connection with Toni and Cheryl. We are on Conroe's FM 104.5 and 106.1, and we're coming live to you every Tuesday at 12 p.m. We'll be right back after the break to continue talking about First Amendment rights.
Hey, Montgomery County, it's me, C.C. Holmes. And I would personally like to take this time to invite you, that's right, you, to join me every Saturday and Sunday from 3 until 7 p.m., where I will bring you the very best of smooth jazz, classic jazz, and indeed, yes, the soulful sounds of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So come along and get jazzy with me. That's right, jazzy. Right here, of course, on Conroe's 104.5 and 106.1 FM, or worldwide at irlongstar.com.
A Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's radio station with talk, music, weather, and traffic for Montgomery County. Have a question or comment about one of our shows? Want to know how to reach a host? Just contact the station at irlonestar.com or call in and leave a message at 936-647-3776. Get involved with your community with the Lone Star Community Radio.
Welcome back to the Legal Connection with Toni and Cheryl. And Toni's going to start us out this section with a joke. We have a joke for today.
I only usually know 3 jokes, and I used to
Okay.
tell this one all the time, and I'm going to tell it poorly. But it's an Easter joke.
Okay.
Okay. And I didn't write it down, so y'all are going to have to just bear with me. All right. So there was a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead, and which I've been all of at some point in my life. And the St. Peter was asking them, if one of you or all of you can tell me the meaning of Easter, then you can get into heaven. And so the brunette immediately said, "Oh, I know what it is." She goes, "It's a very important day where we celebrate Christ, and everybody gets together, and it's a day where we have Christmas gifts, and Santa shows up, and there's turkey." And he said, "No, you have to go back. You try again later." And so then the redhead was like, "Oh, what is wrong with her? People say, brunettes just aren't that smart. Redheads are smarter." And she says, "Okay, so here is what Easter is all about. It's a day when we all give great thanks, and there's a huge turkey, and we all get together and watch football." And he said, "No, it is not Easter." And so then the blonde says, "I know what the meaning of Easter is, and I cannot believe that we get such a bad rap having blonde hair." And she says, "It's a day when we celebrate that Christ gave his life for us, knowing that that it was prophesied that he gave his life so we would be able to get into heaven and we'd be forgiven of our sins, and he was to rise again and sit at the right hand of the Father. And on the third day when he rose, they rolled the after he's buried, they rolled the big tombstone off, like in the old days, and I guess where he was buried, and Jesus walked out and recognized Mary Magdalene." And then he saw his shadow, and we knew that we'd have 6 more weeks of winter.
No.
I know.
Okay.
The blonde didn't know it either. But anyway, she was doing so well. And so, you know what you learned from that?
What?
Sometimes you saith too much. Stop while you're ahead.
She should quit while she was ahead,
Yes,
right?
Okay.
That's so true. Okay, so some limitations on the first
Oh, let
one.
me ask real quick. Station manager Ethan, do you know who Alexander Hamilton was in a duel with?
I have no idea.
You do not know?
Wait a minute. Station owner Dick.
Station owner
He
Dick
just
may
looked it
know.
up.
Hey, we have the internet though.
Okay.
Hang on. Yeah.
Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr.
It was
Thank
Aaron
you.
Burr.
Thank
Sorry.
you, station manager.
And he actually
knew.
killed him. Alexander Hamilton killed him.
Yes. And so this is why Station Manager Dick owns the station and runs this. He's the worldly kind of guy that can use the internet quickly.
That's right.
But yeah, Alexander Hamilton killed him and then was not convicted of murder. That's crazy too.
Well, people loved him. I mean, they still love him. They have a musical about him right now.
We do love our statesmen. Many people love Clinton. Many people, and I mean Bill Clinton, the president, and many people love Obama, and many people love Trump. We love our statesmen. So
We certainly do. Okay, well, so some
I like
limitations.
I like Nixon. I'm still a big staunch. I just love Nixon.
Nixon was.
I think Watergate was just, it was a bad thing, but he was still a very,
was.
very good president for us.
It was. Well, I thought this is all bunny trail, but I've thought about Watergate a lot with all the stuff that Trump is talking about
Yeah.
and Obama.
Yeah. What's going on right now sure makes Watergate look like nothing. But you know what? In the big picture, my very favorite president so far, I think it's because my era was Reagan. I just love Reagan.
Oh, right.
He came right in on his horse. And so
Oh,
anyway,
absolutely. How could you
politics
not?
aside, what's going on with the First Amendment?
Okay,
And thank
so-
you, station owner and Dick and station
Ethan.
manager Ethan for giving it a shot.
Giving it a shot.
Yeah.
Along with Hamilton.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so in Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, that was a 1940 case, and Walter Chaplinsky was a Jehovah's Witness who was using the sidewalk as a public place to speak, and he was cussing and yelling and saying all sorts of stuff about the
Happens
politicians.
downtown Houston all the time.
Right, right.
I walk through it to go to court.
He said, right. He said that he was in downtown Rochester, New Hampshire. He was calling organized religion a racket. After a large crowd had gathered, blocked the roads, Chaplinsky saw the town marshal approaching, and he'd been there before, warning Chaplinsky, now don't
And I'm
create
sure
a
the
commotion.
town marshal was not a Jehovah's Witness.
Well, so Chaplinsky started calling him all sorts of names. He said he was a GD racketeer and a damn fascist, and
Ugh. This sounds like he's going to get charged with
Well, he
assault on a
was-
public servant. But hey, how did it turn out? What
he was convicted,
Of
and
what?
he appealed.
What was he convicted of?
I guess public commotion. disturbing the peace.
Okay.
And
I can see that because they're trying to stop him, so they had to come up with something.
Right.
Maybe criminal mischief. I don't know. But anyway, continue.
So he appealed, and it went, and the opinion of the court, making it the law of the land, replaced a restriction on the freedom of speech. They said certain well-defined and narrowly limited categories of speech fall outside the bounds of constitutional protection. Thus, the lewd and obscene, the profane and the slanderous, and in this case, insulting or fighting words. Do you remember that from law school?
Yes.
They're fighting words.
Well, I was thinking because he was using profanity, that was also something that we should do that all the time. But that wasn't that profane. We don't know what was. We weren't there.
This was 1942, and this is.
They used some bad language back in 1940. They just didn't publish it as much. I mean, we're not seeing what was really there. But anyway,
Right.
so what happened?
It said insulting or fighting words neither contributed to the expression of ideas or possessed any social value in the search for the truth. So they wanted the discussion of ideas and the search for the truth, and that kind of fighting words don't contribute.
So anyway, he was arrested. I'm assuming that he was convicted and that the appellate court confirmed that, right, or affirmed it, right? And it's probably because of the way he did it. If he had been a little bit more civil about his approach and had not been, I guess, kind of leaning toward violence, perhaps, and kind of scaring people because that's not in the public's best interest, he probably would have been able to assert his First Amendment rights and been fine. But it was the other things that added into it that had the conviction stand.
Right. It was the fighting
What did he get,
words.
do you know?
No, I don't.
Probably just probation.
But it was fighting words, and there's another case, I don't have the case, but I remember the rule of law in that case was the description, the carving out of fighting words were words that when someone hears, no reasonable person could restrain themselves from punching or hitting or lashing back. Fighting words.
Right. We're still talking about First Amendment. This would be aside from crimes where somebody's, threatening to kill you. That's a completely different crime. This is First Amendment and it's civil. So that's kind of where
the freedom of
distinction is.
speech. Right. And then also another restriction that was placed on the freedom of speech is valid time, manner, and place restrictions on speech. That was in a case, Heffron v. Krishna Consciousness, and it was 1981. I don't know if you remember, but I remember. You can go to the airport, you can go anywhere without being handed all this literature from the Hare Krishnas.
George Harrison in that group.
Was George Harrison a Hare Krishna?
He was kind of involved with it for a while. I don't think it was a Hare Krishna, but I remember that kind of him being, maybe he supported them, but I may be kind of off track on that completely.
Okay.
But I do remember at the airports all the time. And then right after that, they came out with that movie Airplane. And of course, that reminded me just now of my favorite movie of all time is The Airplane.
Right.
And I know that our station owner and manager don't even know what that movie
no
is.
idea
They're
what
way
we're
too
talking
young.
about.
Oh,
Right.
you've seen Airplane? Oh, isn't it funny?
Oh, Ethan's shaking his head, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask something real quick because something you brought up, and it's a multiple choice question, and it's for it's going to be for Dick, Ethan, or Hugh. Okay. And so, which of the following categories of speech is never protected by the First Amendment? It's sort of a recap of what you just said. A, expression intended and likely to incite imminent lawless action. B, true threats. C, clear and imminent threats to national security. And D, all the above. Which do y'all think? Which of the following of speech is never protected by the First Amendment?
Clear threats, threats to our national security, and I'm going to go with D. I think all of them.
And what do y'all think?
I agree.
Okay. And Dick, explain on the internet. We don't know. Okay. It says D is the correct answer.
Oh,
and the reason is the law recognizes that certain categories of speech, fairly small in number and defined by law, are not protected by the First Amendment. That means this doesn't happen very often and can be lawfully restricted and are punished. The categories that for A, B, and C above are among those in unprotected speech categories. So do not go around, let's see, the expression intended and likely, don't incite imminent lawless action. Do not make true threats.
Note to self, okay.
And do clear and imminent threats to national security, which actually I think I see that on TV all the time. That should not be protected by the First Amendment, but I see people get away with it. So There is a fine line.
Okay.
When you say clear and imminent threats to national security, we're talking about North Korea and people saying North Korea is great, and go ahead and if they bomb, like when Jane Fonda went over there during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really just right there on the border, which is
right.
pretty bad. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the valid time, manner, and place restrictions. It doesn't mean that Hare Krishnas can't pass out literature.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't take over a fairground. They can't take over an airport. They're restricted to a certain location and a manner of doing it.
And it seems to me they never did take over the airport. They had their small little flower child thing kind of going on the side, but that does make sense.
Yeah, and what I really mean by takeover is just freely roam the airports,
And I'm thinking that brings to mind the abortion rights. When people try to protest in front of the physicians that do abortions or the clinics, their First Amendment rights they're protected in trying to block them and do things as long as all of these, they're not inciting a riot, they're not threatening anybody. But when they cross the line and they start threatening the doctor, that's when, that does happen too.
Yeah,
So.
that is not protected speech.
They can't in the middle of the night, they can't go over there and protesting in front of this guy's house because that's not protected. So that's sort of the example.
Right, and then we also have the case about burning the flag. That's expression. That's okay.
It's okay to burn the flag, and that just amazes me.
And burning the draft card. That's okay.
I'll ask our two young guys here. Do y'all even know what the draft card is? Have y'all ever heard of that?
I have.
Okay. And so what is your knowledge of the draft card?
Draft card. I mean, I kind of know.
Because
what it is,
we're
but
not
it's
born
like
during the
it's-
Vietnam.
But I wasn't born way back then. But it's basically just.
I don't know
card
either.
that-
To tell you the truth, even I was a baby when all that was going on. But from what I recall, there was a certain draft, and when your number came up, if you fell within the restrictions of, you had to go and
you got it in the mail.
You got it in the mail. You got your draft card. Then whatever your number was, when your number was up, you had to go to war, basically. And so that was a big deal. People were burning their draft card because they didn't want to go to war, like Muhammad Ali before he was, I guess, Cassius Clay before he was Muhammad Ali. Do you even know who Muhammad Ali is?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
All guys, no matter how old they are, know who Muhammad Ali is.
I didn't know.
They do. Okay, well, we're about to go to break. We want to tell you that you can tune in on Tuesdays from 12 to 1 p.m. on 104.5 or 106.1, or you can wait until the next day, Wednesday, and you can download our podcast and listen to us on Google Play and iTunes. We'll be right back.
Our talk shows and music shows are looking for sponsors. Want to expand your brand awareness? Reach the hyperlocal audience in Montgomery County? Lone Star Community Radio sponsorships accomplish this. Want to see our stats and rates? Check out ourlonestar.com/sponsor for more information. Or call in and leave us a message at 936-647-3776 with your questions. Get seen on TV, YouTube, and heard on our podcast, FM, and internet radio. Support your local radio station with Lone Star Community Radio.
Hispanic Chamber Connections with Dr. Carlos Sanchez, President of the Woodlands Conroe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, featuring event announcements, member highlights, and more. Tuesdays at 1 p.m., broadcasting from the heart of Conroe, Texas on irlonestar.com and Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1.
Welcome back to the Legal Connection with Toni and Cheryl. Today we're talking about First Amendment, and just to wrap up the cases that have evolved the First Amendment or extended the First Amendment, there was one student that had a jacket on that said F the draft, except for the word, F the draft, and that was held to be freedom of speech, freedom of expression. There was this one kid who had on a sign, "Bong hits for Jesus," and so that was not, the freedom to promote the use of illegal drugs. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't be extended
Really?
that far. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And also, well, you know,
That's weird. You can say F the draft, but you can't say bong hits for Jesus.
Well, F
In
the
Colorado,
draft,
you can. Can't you?
F the draft was 1971, and bong hits for Jesus was 2007, and the court was completely different then.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
huh?
But
And
but the
then-
reason was because it was you can't promote a crime.
Well, that's how they got it, and also they were saying that the teacher who enforced that should be reprimanded. She
She was
inhibited-
over there smoking her.
No, she inhibited the students' right to express themselves, and the court said,
Oh no, she
uh-uh.
was okay. She
Yeah.
was the
court
one
said
that was
she was
not.
fine.
Okay.
She was acting under the rules of the school.
Okay.
But then, so it was extended to even young people. They can wear black armbands, even nonverbal expression of speech.
Mm-hmm.
They can protest, wear black armbands. They can,
Which they do now.
Yeah.
We see that all the time.
because the Supreme Court gave them that freedom or extended that to them.
And here's a little I have a political question, real quick. It's true, false.
Mm-hmm.
True or false? Students cannot be forced to pledge allegiance to the flag.
True.
And the answer to that, and I know that's true, but I'm just going to verify it. It's true.
Oh,
Yay! The U.S. Supreme Court, not has held that the students have a First Amendment right to refuse to recite the Pledge of Allegiance or salute the flag during school. And that is 1943. That is a case from one of the school board ones, but still, that's a very well settled law that you do not have to pledge the flag. And we know that because of the kneeing and all that stuff at the NFL games of late,
Right.
which I think probably damaged the NFL's
I think so, too.
pocketbook a little bit.
I think
All right,
so,
carry
too.
on.
No, that's, I just want to share two Bible verses
Okay.
about speaking.
And then we're going to have trivia questions.
And then Toni's going to give us her trivia questions. It's interesting. One of mine was James 1:9, which you talked about James 1 at the beginning, 1 through 6 or something.
Oh, interesting.
James 1:9, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not work the righteousness of God. I think it's interesting.
I wish I'd had that scripture yesterday at the court with me.
Really?
I mean, the attorneys were in the hall. It was just insane.
Yelling at each
It's
other.
just like, just if you don't have something nice to say, and especially it's not productive, just don't say it. But
And then Titus 2:1, speak the things which become sound doctrine. Don't just ramble on. Don't be rude and hateful. So I just think it's important that we do have freedoms, but with freedom comes responsibility.
Yes.
And let's not incite each other to punch us in the face or cause
I promise
crowd
I won't do
riots.
that. I'm not going to
Okay,
incite
Toni.
anybody. Okay.
Let's hear your question.
All right, so this is a group. We don't have any prizes or anything, but okay, which student is most likely to prevail on his or her First Amendment claim? All right. A. Rebecca wants to challenge the school's dress code that prohibits students from wearing micro mini skirts at school. She thinks she's got hot legs. B. Rob wants to challenge a school policy that prohibits students from wearing flip-flops to class. C. Rachel wants to challenge a school policy that prohibits her from wearing an anti-war T-shirt. I think we just went over that. D. Reggie wants to challenge a school policy that prohibits students from dyeing their hair bright, non-natural colors. Which is the correct? Which student prevails on First Amendment?
I'm going to go with C.
You're right. We didn't even
I
get
am.
our panel here.
That was the war one, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
okay,
right.
I
That-
Were
was
you going to
thinking-
say C?
Yeah, I was gonna say C also.
That's exactly right, and here is why. You already explained it to us, but we're going to hear it again. A while this is going to let people, we're not at war, but whatever. If it goes along with this, at least you can do that. Where there are limits and ongoing disagreements among courts about where the specific lines are drawn, courts have generally allowed school officials a fair share of leeway in determining appropriate dress. Okay, we're going to look at another question. The First Amendment prohibits, true or false? The First Amendment prohibits private schools that accept government funding from censoring or punishing students who participate in lawful and peaceful on-campus speech activities. True or false?
The First Amendment prohibits them
Yes.
from doing that?
Yes.
That's false.
That's false. Yeah, that's false.
You are absolutely right, both of you.
No,
The
no,
First
no. We
Amendment
need our
only
background
prohibits
music.
government officials from restricting a citizen's free speech
Right.
activities.
See, that's important. I think that for our listeners, these restrictions apply to state actors, government officials, things like
Yes.
that. If Toni were to do that, it would be wrong, but there wouldn't be any repercussions you wouldn't be arrested for that.
Right.
But state actors can't do it.
To follow up on that, administrators at a private school are not government officials and are therefore not limited by the First Amendment.
Exactly.
The mere receipt of government funding without more does not alter a private school's status as a non-governmental entity. Note that even though the First Amendment may not limit administrative censorship at a private school, there are often other avenues of legal protection. For example, contractual provisions, state laws, and these are available to private school students.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we want to thank you for listening today. We've been talking about First Amendment, and you can listen live 12 to 1 on Tuesdays at 104.5 or 106.1 Conroe's FM. You can also download our podcast. It'll be available tomorrow. And you can listen on Google Play, iTunes. Send us your questions at questions@legalconnectionshow.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Serve God by serving each other, and eat a lot on Fast Tuesdays. You've got to fast for the next 40 days. You can't eat any chocolate for Valentine.
Oh,
Ash Wednesday.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this production of Lone Star Community Radio. Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's community radio station. Don't forget to check out this show and many others across the Lone Star Community Radio Network, either live on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, the Lone Star Internet Radio app, or irlonestar.com's live audio stream, and on replay on podcast, Channel 12's Our City TV in Conroe, or Channel 21 KVQT in Houston, and of course their YouTube channel. This production is copyrighted and all rights are reserved by Lone Star Community Radio. Have a question regarding this program or other Lone Star Community Radio shows? Want to sponsor or start your own show? Call the station message line at 936-647-3776 or email the station at lscrstudios@gmail.com.